הניסים ועל הברכן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות, על הניסים ועל הברכן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה, בזמן הזה שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
Welcome to Jewish Life, a program presented in cooperation with the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. I'm your host, Stewart Ain. Every week we present programs of particular interest to the Jewish community. Today we're going to be doing something different. We're going to be speaking with authors of different books. It's something we're going to be doing over the next several months. And we're working together with Jews Love to Read. That's a Facebook page. And it's founded by my wife, who's also an author, Meryl Ain. And she's brought along with her two authors to join us today. First of all, Inge Auerbacher. She spent 3 years as a child in prison in the Nazi concentration camp Theresienstadt. Few children survived that. But then she was able to survive, emigrated to the United States in 1946, received a BS in chemistry, and during her career as a chemist, she worked with renowned medical scientists and researchers, and then she authored 6 books and is recipient of many awards, including, as I say, 2 honorary doctorates, and her books have been published in 9 languages. They include I Am a Star, Beyond the Yellow Star to America, Running Against the Wind, Finding Dr. Schatz, Highway to New York, and Children of Terror. And also joining us is Sylvie Heyman. She was a child during World War II. She and her family escaped from Europe in 1940, came to South America, and when she was a teenager, the family resettled in the United States. She became a registered nurse, and for 27 years, she practiced that and later earned degrees in chiropractic and acupuncture, incorporating those fields into her private practice. Her first book, Make It a Habit, Creating Health and Happiness for Your Body, Mind, and Spirit, was published in 1917 when she was 79 years old. Her second book, Beyond the Holocaust, An Immigrant's Search for Identity, tells the personal narrative of her family's odyssey. And welcome everybody to the program. Thank you for joining us today. Meryl, welcome.
Okay, well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to be here with Sylvie and Inge. And just one correction, Sylvie's first book was published in 2017, not 1917, because if she was 79 in 1917, we would be interviewing her for other reasons. So, okay, so I'm going to begin by asking both of you a question, and I'd like Inge to answer first, and then Sylvie. So both of your writing is very personal. What motivated you to write about your experiences during World War II? Inge?
Yes, thank you, by the way, for inviting me. And hi, Sylvia. Nice to meet you too. Anyway, I always wanted to write my story, and I made little notes about it. How am I going to do it? And I had a very good friend at City University, Professor Braham, who gave many lectures, had a whole group of lectures there on the Holocaust, so forth. And we became very good friends and first name basis. I said, Randy, I want to write, but how do I begin? And he said, well, you begin. You take a piece of paper and take a pen. I said, yes, I know, but how? He said, look, you went through this as a child, very young child. Do it from a child's perspective. So I started actually to write first little poems to tell the story through, I called it epic rhyme. I like to write poetry in rhyme, to tell a story, and not to, if I can write a poem in 18 lines, I would have to do it maybe in 28 pages. And the children do not want to read that much. And I started this, and actually my idea, to go back a tiny bit, I was very sick after the war. I had tuberculosis. I spent 2 years in the hospital, a total of 4 years in bed. I lost 8 years of schooling, and I couldn't go to school. I never finished my first grade. So when I was in bed, what can I do? I had complete bed rest. I started to write. And in the hospital already, I wrote my life story. We had bedside classes, not all the time, because most of the kids were very sick. So was I. And that was my first real essay on my life. And then when I came home, there was nothing to do. I had no friends, nothing. So I started again with this poetry thing, because my mother always gave me a poem for my birthday. She was a pretty good poet, very good. And I got one published, and I said, oh, gee, I like that, in just a little newspaper from the Roosevelt Savings Bank. But when I started the book, it was actually only after 1981, when we had a first world gathering of Jewish Holocaust survivors in Jerusalem. And I wrote a poem for that. And I met somebody in the hospital, in the ladies' dressing room, who talked about that she could, has gigs. I didn't know what gigs are. She was a singer. And I came out of my store and I said, oh, can you write music? She said, sure. Well, I said, I have a poem. I would love this to be set to music. And she said, give it to me. So, when I got home, I sent it to her. Within a day, she had the melody. And that became the only original song at the First World Gathering in Jerusalem, was called We Shall Never Forget.
Wow.
The only original one. And it was by the second generation. So my career in music, which I do now too, I'm a songwriter, poetry, no music. And then I said, it's time to do your life story. And then after, when I came back, I spoke to Professor Graham. He said, well, sit down and do it. And it took a while. And I went to the library very near the hospital where I worked. I worked at Elmhurst General Hospital for 30 years. My career spanned 38. And I sat down with the little kiddies in the children's room. And I said, what do you like to see on the cover? What do you want to read about? And I became very good friends with the children's librarian. And she would help me somewhat, where can I go to publish this thing and so forth. And that's how my career really began as a writer of books. Poetry, I've had more than 50 that were published, but not a real book.
Sylvie, why did you wait until you were 79?
I was very involved in my professions as a healthcare practitioner, and I really never thought I had a story, and I still don't. And I was, there were some people who wanted me to write the story, and but I never thought that I had a story, because I grew up under the shadow and the sort of the umbrella of the Holocaust following me. We left Europe, during the war, and my parents were obsessed with what was going on, and I grew up with that feeling, that cloud of the Holocaust. But when I came to this country, and it was when we started to look at the life of Anne Frank, and I started to read a bit more and know what was happening or had happened, is when I became, very guilty. And I started to have tremendous feelings of guilt. And I manifested it in many unhealthy ways, mutilation and all kinds of negative ways about it. So I didn't think I had a story, but I was encouraged to write it. And I only wrote it really because my first book, Make It a Habit, was aligned with my professions. And the editor is the one who encouraged me, and my children who encouraged me to go ahead and write the story of my life.
How were you able to get out in 1940? That's so few Jews were able to, am I right? 40,
Almost
that's
impossible. Yeah.
how'd you get out?
We were a big family. My mother's had a lot of brothers and sisters, and we were a large family traveling through France, Marseille, and my mother kept going to the consulate all the time. And we were very, very fortunate to have two benefactors. Aristides de Sousa Mendes, the ambassador to Portugal, who was in France, was a wonderful man who, he went ahead and signed the visas to at least come to Portugal. My father was German, so it was not easy. We could not get into the United States because of the quota. And but there was another ambassador, the ambassador of Brazil, who also had strong sentiments for the Jews. We were just very fortunate. To have a visa then, and a visa that we had from this particular ambassador was a what do you call it? A diplomatic visa. Here we were in a ship with diplomats, supposedly. My father was obsessed with the idea of we were going to be caught and sent back to the dungeons, but that did not happen. We did go to Brazil and lived a very, very secluded life, always scared that we were going to be found out, that we were not really legitimately in the country. My father had brothers in Argentina, and we went to Argentina, and and I was there for 8 years.
Meryl?
Wow. Yeah. Inga, I'm intrigued because I have 3 sons, and I loved dolls when I was growing up, and I continued to collect dolls. I'm fortunate now I have granddaughters, but I love dolls. Can you tell us about your doll, Marlene, and how that figures into your book?
Yeah, it figures most important into my whole life. My grandmother gave me a doll when I was 2 years old. And she had blue eyes and blonde hair, but she was made out of cellulose, so it wasn't real hair. And my mother loved movie stars, so she had this album, and I looked at it, and I said, "Mommy, who's that lady with the blue eyes and blonde hair?" She says, "Well, that's the famous Marlene Dietrich." And I said, "I'm going to name my doll Marlene." And I did. But once when I was speaking in Germany, which I still speak German very well, and I do a lot of work in Germany, and I had a slide presentation, and Marlene is in almost every book, every story, every picture that I have, very important to me. And she looked at this picture, the slide, and says, "You had a special doll, a Schildkrötpuppe, a turtle doll, very expensive dolls." I said, "Yeah, that's what she was." And by the way, her name was not Marlene. Her name was Inge. That model's name was Inge. I never knew that before a few years ago. And she was made for the Special Olympics, the Hitler Olympics in 1936 in Berlin. So of course she had to have blue eyes and blonde hair.
And how did you get to keep her though? How you said it was the one possession you were able to keep?
Well, it was very difficult when we were searched and everything before we went to the camp in the place with collection center. They took in Göppingen was the place. I come from the state of Württemberg. Today it's Baden-Württemberg. And the collection center first was in the town where we were living nearby, and then Stuttgart. And then they said, "Open everything on the table." And I was 6 years old at that time, the youngest in a transport of over 1,000 people, over 1,000, close to 1,200. I was 7 years old. And one of the guards saw I had a little Dutch boy pinned to my clothes, my favorite one. He ripped it off and he yelled at me in the German dialect, "Du brauchst es nicht, wo du hingehst. You won't need this where you're going." He saw my doll, ripped her from me. And he looked inside her hollow body. And of course, I wasn't hiding anything. And I made a fuss. I was not going to give him my doll. And he gave the doll back. And I arrived in the camp like that, holding my doll. I slept with my doll in double-deck bunk beds on top. I made a box for her, a really ugly piece. It was very dirty box out of, who knows what it was used for. And I slept with her like that. And one morning I found a gray thing in the box. I said, I didn't put that there. It was a dead mouse who even starved, couldn't even find even a crumb of bread. So that was my life. And I brought it to America. When I arrived on the boat, when I was 11 years old in 46, I had my doll in my arms. Wow. And when I was sent to the hospital, she was next to me. I gave the doll some years ago to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. I said, I'm only giving it to you if you are going to show that doll. And they promised, but they reneged on their promise. They showed maybe 6 months or something. And now she is in a box somewhere. In a prison, in where they keep artifacts. And I'm almost thinking of taking her back. I signed her away because this is my crazy idea. I might want to be buried with my doll in my arms. That's how much she means to me. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was very sorry that they reneged on the promise because they wanted her so badly. They had a show in New York of Daniel's story to try that out. And they wanted something, a child's toy. And that's how it is. I mean, because the children, they visit the museum and they get my ID card. We want to see Marlene. We want to see Marlene. And Marlene meant so much to me that I read one day that her son, who's a filmmaker, was going to be at a film festival in Boston. And I took a bus on a very rainy day to try to meet the grandson of Marlene Dietrich. I saw him, but we only talked a few minutes. Yeah, I told him.
Wow.
Yeah.
So thank you. So Sylvie, we talked a little bit about, what motivated you to write about your personal experience in your book Beyond the Holocaust. But was there something more? Did you want to perpetuate the memory of the Holocaust, of your family? Why do you think it's important to write about the Holocaust?
Well, of course, everything that you said, absolutely. And but I just never felt that I was privy of that, that I was the person to do so. But of course, we must never forget. We must never let it forget. But I didn't think that in fact, my book started off, actually, I named it Beyond Survival, an Immigrant Search for Identity. That's how I didn't want, even though I was going to talk about the Holocaust at the beginning, about the war. It's really, I didn't want, it to be construed as if I was a Holocaust survivor. As you well knew, you actually, wondered why I said that. And that's because of people like Inge. It is because here it is. Here I am answering your question, Sylvie. Why would you not call yourself a Holocaust survivor? I think you are. This is what you said to me in an email, and here is the proof. Inge, and Inge, and there are other people that I know and in my family who really went through the Holocaust. How could I possibly put myself in that category? So I wanted to call it Beyond Survival. But I sent the book out, the manuscript actually, before it became a book. I sent it to Professor Bonnie Norton, a linguist, expert, in the field of language and linguistics, and she's a professor in Canada. And I just looked her up on Zoom, I'm sorry, on Google. And I asked her if she would review my manuscript, and she did. And she said, of course, I have to read the entire manuscript if you want me to review it. I said, of course, because I have a lot about language in my book. And she then inspired me. She actually thought that I should change the title. She was very complimentary to the book, and she thought I should change the title to Beyond the Holocaust. So I did. But I really, now that we have together a real Holocaust survivor, I am a war survivor. We made it through wars, but there's a big difference between just being World War II survivor and what Inge went through. And I forgot what the question was about.
Okay, that's good.
Inge,
Inge,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
ask Inge if you could just, you've spoken to, somebody said about a lot of people, right? Many, many audiences.
Oh, yes.
Right? I mean, I saw one figure, I don't believe it, but what do most people want to know?
Well, they asked me, what was in you that, what is your philosophy of survival? I said, I was a little girl. I wasn't interested in philosophy. I was very lucky to be together with my parents most of the time because my father was a disabled war veteran with the Iron Cross of World War I. But that did not save you. It did not. We stayed in an area where they were all disabled war veterans. Now, men, women, and children were separated for the most part in Terezin. They could still, that's a Czech word, because the German word is so long. And but we shared a tiny room without any heat, nothing, double-deck bunk beds with a family from Berlin. And her name was Ruth. She had the identical doll to mine. And there was a very big, choosing the people, a selection, especially of the World War I disabled war veterans. And my father and him went the same time. His name was Abraham. I was Auerbacher, AA. They did everything the way, alphabetically. And they went to Auschwitz. And she gave me some of her doll's clothing before she left. She said, you will visit me in Berlin and I will come to little Kippenheim, a little village in the deep south. So what did we think about? Food. I mean, I wasn't thinking about, philosophy. How did I survive? Sure, we're running around in the garbage dump. That was my survival. And there were a lot of Czech people there. They had it a little bit, the children a little better. They had a teacher, and there was in some of the homes, which I did not have. I missed out on most of my schooling, never even finished my first grade. I started school at age 15. So this philosophy thing, I mean, I said, when I see kids, let's say 8, 9 years old, I said, well, what's your philosophy? And they look at me, no. That is a silly question, but they ask questions. What made you survive? Survival is to have hope and to wish for another day and dreams that someday we'll be rid of all of this. That was the hope. And it's just like the national anthem of Israel, hope, hatikva. You cannot live without hope and some kind of positive attitude, which my parents had, especially my father. Don't worry, it'll get better one day.
Sylvie, were you aware what was going on in Europe when you were in South America?
Well, in Argentina, we came just when Perón was becoming the president, Juan Perón. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. And, even though there was no overt persecution going on, my father was almost paranoid about what was going on because he had to live as family, his mother and his sisters and family did perish in Germany. He never saw them again after he had left Germany to come to Belgium. He was only coming there to work. But so what was going on? There was a feeling that you couldn't really, there was no feeling of freedom. There was no feeling of freedom. There was always, police people out there, and if I grew up in fear. I just grew up in a lot of fear, looking in the back of the shoulder all the time, and hoping for the day that we could come to America.
But you're so, both of you are so resilient. I mean, we hear the word resilience so often now during the pandemic. Do you have any, both of you, do you have any advice to offer people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they make a big deal about it. You have food in the house. Your table is filled with food. You have a roof under your head, above your head. You have television, you have iPhones, we have Zoom, we can do everything. We can even Zoom every day with people in every country, I mean, Turkey and so on. By the way, Sylvie, I want to tell you something. My family landed up in Argentina too, in what was called Moses Town, I believe. And I've been to Argentina and Brazil. I still have family in Sao Paulo. My immediate family. We tried to get out also, especially to Brazil, but the doors were closed. Yeah. The Brazilians, I think Americans are babies, really. They are spoiled.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have your steak every day or whatever it is, be happy what you have. It's not that bad. I mean, it'll get better. It'll get better. And you can talk to your friends like we are. It's almost like next door. So, I mean, I really don't feel so deprived. Yes, I would like to travel again. They want me back in Russia. That's not going to happen right now. But that's it, be grateful for what you have. Be grateful. It could be a lot worse.
So Sylvie, as a life coach, do you have a few words of advice to people who are struggling?
Well, I'm more of a health coach, helping people with the physical problems, but I have to say I echo everything that Inge just said. It is a bad situation that we're here, that we are experiencing at this time, but it's global, and a lot of people, so many people have died. But I agree with Inge that there is a certain spoiledness about the people who have never gone through a war or suffering, and you just get up and you go, and like Inge said, beautifully said, Inge, thank you so much for taking the words right out of my mouth, that be grateful. I agree with that.
Yes. What I was wondering about was, were you able to, in South America, read the news that was going on in the war? What was happening over there? Or there was little news about
there
the war?
Was, are you asking me? So what was happening is that not so much, certainly La Prensa did not put the news out there in the newspaper that I know of, but people were coming in now. This was in the war was over, 1945, and people were coming into the different countries. And my parents were, privy to meeting those people because we had gone through that. So I would always hear little conversations about this person is alive. They came, they're here. This person died. Did you hear that person didn't make it? So this is what I kept hearing all the time. But of course, my parents weren't going to discuss this with me. I was 6 years old when I came to Argentina. They weren't discussing that with me. And in fact, they were prohibiting me from even listening to anything. So it was a very dark period. I was in a convent, actually. They put me in a convent for 2 years. And, somebody once said, oh, well, you were in a convent, just like you know, in a concentration camp. Oh, no, this was not I was alone. There was nobody to talk to, you know, but it was not a concentration camp. But it was a period of absolutely not knowing what was going on.
Sylvie, when did you ever hear from your father that he was aware that Nazis had fled the country and they were given entree to Argentina? And tell me about that.
Well, you know, he, at the beginning, of course, he wasn't completely aware, but you know what? It infiltrated because, you know, there was like an inside group, and that group was the refugees, the people that came from Europe that were now in Argentina. We were privy to information. We almost were drawn to it. They were drawn to each other. They knew where to find each other. And then there was, you know, information. Sometimes it was wrong information, sometimes right information. But that's when they began to suspect that, yes, that there were Nazis amongst us. And that's why he was so paranoid, and rightly so. Yes.
Yes. And in fact, they were brought out whole groups of them, whole platoons.
Perón was very smart, you know. He didn't talk against, you know, the war was over. It would have been stupid of him to say something, you know, against anti-Semitism. It would have been stupid. So he claimed, you know, to be open to the Jews and let them do this and that. But in the meantime, his buddies were coming into the country, and my father knew all that. My father understood all that. And he was completely obsessed with this whole thing. My mother, not so much, but my father it was very difficult for him. And
what I always wondered was whether or not some of the people who had fled, the Jews who had fled, are now in Argentina and they see a Nazi from one of the camps and say, hey, I recognize you, or something like that. But
there have been pictures made of that. There have actually been films made of that.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It happened then. Yes.
I'd like to ask you both a little bit about your books and about your writing process, and perhaps when you answer, you can hold up your book so everybody can see it. So I'd like to know, what is your writing process, and how long did it take you? Well, Inge, you have so many books. We want to talk about how long it took you to write the first books, and then others, and then Sylvie, how long it took you. Sylvie, you want to go first since?
Okay. All right. Well, you know, this is my second book, and this is the book about Beyond the Holocaust. It took me 2 years. And this is one thing that I would like to just mention. It was not an easy thing to write. I wrote the other book, you know, writing book, you know, when you have to write it so that's interesting for the reader, you just don't want to say, I did this, I did that. You want to make it an interesting, you know, passage. But writing the Habit book was one thing. Writing this book, here's what it did for me. It was not particularly good because I had repressed a lot of those memories. Unlike Inge, they never surfaced. I never sought to put it. I wanted to hide it. But when I started to write it, a lot of things surfaced. And I had a lot of problems. Sleeping problems, anxiety problems, tossing into memories that came back and haunted me. Would I do it again? Yes. Why? Because of what you just said before. Because it's my duty. If I have any kind of knowledge at all about what happened, it's my duty to pass it on. But did I have fun doing it? No, it was very, very painful. And the book is available. Oh, and also my book is not for me to make any money from, even though I spent a lot of money putting this book together with edits and so forth. This book, 100% of the amount of money that comes in is going to HIAS. I'm hoping that I have enough to give International Rescue Society also, but I have worked for HIAS, and so I have a soft spot for HIAS, And when I get my royalties, it goes immediately to highest. So it is.
Wow,
That's the Hebrew Immigrant
that's
Aid
amazing.
Society.
I changed. Sorry.
The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. That's the
Yeah,
group that
yeah,
people come out. Right.
And in fact, I even changed my branding a little bit because I used to put down RNDC, LAC, and all that. And I thought, oh, that's all in the past. And then I put down writer. But now I feel that I am an immigrant advocate. And I changed my branding in some of the social media. That's hey, I don't know how many more years I have. I'm going to be 83 in a few weeks. And so the rest of my time here, I want to make that book, give awareness and put it back into where it belongs.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. You just tell our viewers where they can find your book and where they can find you.
My website is sylvieheyman.com, sylvieheyman.com. The book can be purchased if it's purchased from Balboa Press, then there is a higher royalty, more can be donated. But it's easier to just say it's Amazon. It can go to Amazon. It's less money, but that's okay. It'll get there. So Amazon.com. So it's just.
Thank you. And Inge, would you tell us about, answer that question? Tell us about how long it took you, I guess, to write your first book and maybe the second two, and what your writing process was.
Well, my first book, it went gradually. I was working sometimes 13 days, 2 weeks at a time. I did a lot of it on the subway. In fact, the title came to me on the subway one day. And it came out, I Am a Star, but that's a double.
Hold up the book so we can see.
I Am a Star, which is in many 8 languages.
Okay.
And it has a double meaning. We wore the yellow star. And I turned that into something positive, that to me, every human being is a star. When I go into a school, before I leave, I said, they all have to say, I am a star. I want them to feel good. Now that book, I don't use any agents. I did it myself. This one went to 8 places and they all came back except one. And that's the one I really wanted. And it was Simon & Schuster, and they took it. But it took 3 more years for it to come out. My second one was, even that one was a success. It was much more difficult because they liked the drama of the first. And it took me 7 years, rewriting. And I went from Simon & Schuster to Penguin, where I am now 30 years in print. And this is the latest, the 30-year edition. I have an idea of my 7th book, and they like it at Penguin. Nothing to do with any of this. I'm done with that story. 3 on my life. And I hope they give me a contract soon. Anyway, my second book is Beyond the Yellow Star, where it was difficult to mention some of the things which I had to ask Mama, do you think I should say it? Do you think I should say? Do it. Do whatever you think. But it took rewriting 7 years. And then I found a publisher, a small publisher. They took it. It was not self-published. I didn't have to pay anything, whatever. And I'm still friends with these people. The third one is Finding Dr. Schatz, the man who saved my life. He's the co-discoverer of the antibiotic streptomycin. Then I wrote a book about a Catholic Polish girl who was in labor camps, exactly my age. By the way, I beat you by 3 years. I'm 86 years young. We both look great still, I think.
You look great.
Anyway,
you both look great.
Anyway, and then it was, so that was Children of Terror. Unfortunately, she died last year of pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, same age. So it was a Polish Catholic woman and a Jewish German woman. Then I wrote a book about 2 Black girls, very good friends of mine. that was running against the wind. There were track stars. So the wind is prejudice. And then it was, what is the next one? Running Against the Wind. It's about a lady truck driver. I did my first novella, and I have never even been in a truck. I don't even have a driver's license. So I think I mentioned the 6 of them, but the third, this new one will be totally different. It will be a young children's book, which I never did before. And is it possible I could read one poem? Do we have time?
Sure.
Sure, but could you before you do that, would you just tell us your website and where people can find your books?
Which is not up to date, but it tells a lot of the things, not all the books, whatever. It's my whole name, Inge, Inge Auerbacher at Yahoo, at .com. And the email is my whole name, better that, INGEAUERBACHER at yahoo.com. The book is available at Amazon, and it's also has been recorded. 2 of the books have been recorded by audible.com. It is a play which has been done all over the country, and somebody's writing even a musical right now in Istanbul about it. And that's it. But I would love, if you give me 1 minute,
Sure.
I'd like to give a memory to the murdered children. My best friend, when she was deported to Auschwitz, she had no clue that she was going to be, they said, to the east. And I call that poem in I'm a Star, Who Am I? I call it Hold Me Tight. Excuse me, I'm thinking about my song, Who Am I, which was done at United Nations. And this is a poem about the children who went with the mothers, because in Auschwitz, usually they separate the children together with the mothers and they went straight to the gas chamber. That's most likely what happened to my girlfriend. She was not even 10 years old in 1944. And how she felt. This is through her, what I think, how these children felt going with their mothers. Come with me, my child. Hold my hand. Be calm, my child. Do not try to understand. Don't be afraid, my child. Walk with pride. You know your mother is here at your side. Hold me tight. Day has turned to night. Soon we'll see the light. A mother is giving hope in a place where there is no hope. They had no clue where they're going. No, don't look at the chimneys. See the blue sky. My arm is around to protect you. Don't cry. Come close. Let the blows fall on me. There'll be a day when again we'll be free. Hold me tight. Day has turned to night. Soon we'll see the light. Give all your belongings to them. Quickly undress. One day soon, we will again have happiness. Sleep, my child. I have no more to give. Oh God, we're not going to live. Hold me tight. Day has turned to night. Hold me tight.
Thank you so much. That is so moving and so touching. Thank you, Inge.
Now, Inge, when you spoke at the United Nations
Yes.
on International Holocaust Memorial Day in 2019, did you read that poem or?
No, I wrote another poem which was made into a song, Who Am I? And PS 22, the wonderful children who look like a bouquet of flowers. They're all races, all religions. They're quite poor children from Staten Island. I saw them on television at one of the Oscar presentations, and they closed the Oscar show and singing Over the Rainbow. And I looked at these kids, I said, I want them. That's the song that I would like them to sing. And I found somebody, crazy stories. I heard this person's name on about this composer on the radio Long story, I don't want to take too much time, but I tracked her down, and I said, I have a poem, and I would like this to be a song. We were making a film at that time too. And I was rejected in the United Nations a few times. I wanted to go with my girlfriend, my Polish girlfriend, same age. We were 7 years old at that time. She's Polish Catholic, and I'm German Jewish. And they wouldn't take us, nothing, always, no, 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 no. So somebody said, well, they didn't have such good music the year before. Your kids would be perfect, because they recorded this. And
Listen,
I sent that in. I just want to finish, one second. And they said, we want the kids and we want you, but you get 5 minutes. I said, oh my God. Then it was 4 minutes. I said, no, 5 minutes. Okay, the whole thing took 10 minutes with the kids singing. So that's how it happened. Very difficult to get there, very difficult.
So Sylvie had to leave, but I wanted to ask you, Inge, of all the groups you've spoken to, I guess, was that the highlight, the UN? Or
Well, I was in Moscow too. I was in New Zealand for a Catholic convention. I mean, I've been all over. It meant one of the highlights of my life. It meant a lot to stand on that podium where Putin stood, where the Dalai Lama stood, where all the presidents stood. Here I am, this little girl from Kippenheim, Germany, a village girl who's talking to the world. And believe me, I made every word count. And I told them no more genocide, no more Holocaust. And, my hope, my wish and prayer is for every child to grow up in peace without hunger and prejudice. And at the end, I knew I wanted to say that, because there's a lot of problem in the United Nations with Israel and so on. And I said, loud and clear, no more anti-Semitism. And it was live. They heard me in my village, and a friend of mine heard me. She took pictures of the television in Sicily. I have friends all over now. This whole thing with Zoom and Facebook. I have friends all over the world. We speak almost every day to each other, like next door. So it was a great thing. And then they liked it so much that they wanted me back. So I did a program with United Nations television also.
were you aware that Theresienstadt was being held up by the Nazis as their pride and joy?
I know all about it, which is baloney. It was a show, because almost everybody went to the east. Yeah. Many died there. We had very famous, it was used to show, well, we got all the famous people here, all the intelligentsia, which was true. They had, but they all believed, they told them, oh, you can have an apartment there and this and that. And when they came, what a shock. Where's my apartment? It's supposed to be near the water. Wonderful. I saw Eichmann there. He came at times, yes, he stood before me. I mean, you weren't allowed to look up, but I know in the room where I was, there were 3, 4 SS-men, and I am sure one of them was Eichmann, and I know he came there because we made a very important German film, All Jews Out, which has English subtitles. It won prizes. And the woman who knew him, she worked as a clerk, a telephone operator outside of the camp, and she ate with him. They had a special, beautiful place for them to eat. She was riding around with a horse, and she came from very near my mother's hometown. She says, you're right, he was there. Don't worry, I saw him. I ate with him. And whenever he came, new transports went out to the east. We didn't know what the east meant.
Did you see the Red Cross coming to?
Yes, I did. I couldn't go near, but I know when they were there, beautification of the camp.
You noticed.
And right afterwards, everybody went to Auschwitz. Yeah.
Inge, tell us about, there was a famous opera performed. What was it?
Brundibár. Yeah, Bumblebee. Now, it was in Czech. And I didn't speak Czech, only a few words. I knew what potatoes were, brumbories, and naschledano means goodbye. And the Czech children there were more Czech children. And we were not much together, to be honest with you. And that was really produced by, it was for Czech. It was in Czech. I didn't understand. I did see it. And I was invited last year to come to St. Petersburg and Moscow. They were playing it in the Mariinsky Theater. They want me to come back this year too. And one thing I did, that was the biggest production ever in St. Petersburg, because there's almost nobody left who remembers. I do remember, I didn't understand it, but I remember. But when I was in Moscow, I found out the general who liberated us. And I went to the grave. I put flowers on his grave, huge statue he has, a very beautiful cemetery. All the big shots were buried there, actors, whatever. And I put flowers there. I didn't want any, big production that the AP should come and photograph me. And no, I wanted to do it private and only a few people with me. The chief rabbi of Russia, whom I met, and he sent his secretary because I wanted somebody to say prayers, and a man should say the Tehillim, for this great man who saved my life. So I went there. And actually this year, they want me to come back, and I have a new song, A World of Peace, which I want the world to sing. It is already in Rwanda. One of the young people who survived this terrible genocide in Rwanda sings it in the Rwanda language. I posted it already on Facebook. And it, of course, in English, these children, also my children from PS22, made a recording. It's not officially recorded, but now it's being done in German, and I want it done in Russian. And they really want me to meet Putin. I sent my book, this book, I went to Putin. In fact, I have a picture, dear Mr. President Putin. They wanted me to send it to him as a peace offering. I'm not a political person. But what we want to do, we want to go to Moscow. He has another memorial, this general, and I want Russian children to be with me. That is my dream, to sing that song also, A World of Peace. I want the whole world to sing it, like what they did, years ago. They had, what was that song? We Are the World. I want this to be the song. We want peace. I mean, I have Holocaust songs, many, they were recorded, but I want something now. We need peace in this world. And I want children especially to sing it. And I hope my dream will come true. And if anybody's listening in, come to me, please. I want this to go around the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. And I wrote the words. And there's, again, Madeline Stone, who wrote the music together with Alvin Love. Alvin Love is in Nashville. He's the son of C.C. Winans, very big gospel singer and composer. And he has Grammys already. So
let me ask you, I keep hearing this. There are people who say the Holocaust didn't happen, or there weren't that many people who were killed, and it all exaggerated and what. You hear that too?
Well, I not personally, really, but I hear a lot of stuff on the Facebook. I spend a lot of time. I read all these things. And why don't they go and visit a place like Auschwitz? Terezin has still the crematory there, the little fortress, yes, which is a horrible place. They can see what happened and talk to me. I have my order of transport still, the real order of transport, and my number, 13-1-408. Only in Auschwitz did they tattoo it, no other camp, but I had a number. Come to me, ask me questions, and you will see what it was like.
You've been back to Terezin?
A few times, yes, with groups, many times. And I was on the March of the Living, where we went to Auschwitz. I've been there a few times too. I went to also to Dachau. My father was in prison 1938, and my grandfather during Kristallnacht in Dachau. And I went to, my grandmother was sent to Riga in Latvia. I went to the forest. We don't know exactly where she died, but people on that transport told me she was 59 years old. She went to the forest, the Birkennicke forest. There was Rumbula. I always thought it was Rumbula, but Birkennicke is where a lot of the German Jews were sent. There's a plaque on the ground, has all the places where they came from. There's Stuttgart right in front where she came from. We were supposed to go there too. We got out in the last minute of that transport. And I thought, and they had at least about 50 mass graves with cement around it, no name, nothing. I walked on this hill, there maybe past 2 of them, 3 of them. I said, oh my God, no, I should have been in one of those graves. And here I am. I guess I'm a lucky person. And I think when you ask somebody, how did they survive? Purely luck. My best friend didn't make it, and she was half Jewish. The father was half Jewish. Her mother was totally Jewish. She came from Berlin. She practiced Christianity, even in terrorism. She never considered herself Jewish. She died in Auschwitz.
Were the people observant in Jewish people? Were they able to observe?
You
No.
couldn't really observe. Sometimes
I heard that in one of the camps on Hanukkah, they took a potato and put a candle in the potato. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. I only found after the war that they made a little synagogue. I do remember one service. It was in 1944, up in the attic somewhere. It was forbidden. And it was, the people were already going to the transport. They put on their boots and they fasted on Yom Kippur and they prayed, Ovinu Malkeinu, God our King, help us. Unfortunately, I don't know, he had blinders on his ears. I don't know what happened. Almost all those people died.
Did you get a chance to visit Babi Yar?
No, I wasn't not in Babi Yar. But I visited Majdanek and all those places. Yeah.
Now they're going to be putting up some kind of a
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I went back to Dachau, and he was in barrack number 16. Now they only have little plates there because the barracks have been broken down, burned. They were full of lice. I had lice. I had everything you can think of. And of course, the worst thing was that I did get TB in a very bad way. And I came to America 6 weeks later. I landed up in the hospital for 2 years, complete bed rest. Then they let me go home. And then again, terrible. And there was an antibiotic that was discovered at that time and saved my life. And I wrote a book about that, Finding Dr. Schatz. It was through the Jewish Week, by the way, that I found out about him. I never knew. And the Nobel was given to his professor. And I have to say one more thing for Jewish Week. It was unfortunate they didn't write a big article. They should have. I found a girlfriend, my last friend in the camp. They wrote a front page article, Jewish life in Germany today or something like that. And it was my girlfriend, and she was married at that time already. And I didn't know where she went. She was from northern Germany, and they went back to Germany. Her father was a disabled war veteran too, and I'm in touch with her now. And I am also in touch with close relatives to my girlfriend Ruth, who live in Germany today. They lived in Israel, and then one wanted to study medicine. They went to Germany. Anyhow, I met that family in Düsseldorf a year ago, from Ruth. And also through a German newspaper, Tagesspiegel in Berlin. I wrote to them, can somebody help me find my best friend, Ruth? She lived in this and this house, and maybe there's some family. I want a picture. I did get a picture when she was maybe 4 years old, but there is nothing around her. She would have been a great artist, by the way. She made some beautiful pictures, for somebody's birthday. Talking about the potato, I remember one birthday, my birthday card was a mashed up potato with a little bit of hint of sugar on it. That was my birthday cake, the size of a children's hand. That was my birthday cake.
We've run out of time. I want to thank you both very much, Inge Auerbacher and Sylvie Heyman and Meryl Ain, for joining us. This has been Jewish Life. My name is Stewart Ain. Until next week, have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.